Handed Cameron another gaffe in front of the Queen. This time he's caught on camera at the palace insulting countries invited to an anti-corruption summit.
We've got some leaders of some fantastically corrupt countries coming to Britain. Nigeria and Afghanistan, possibly the two most corrupt countries.
Also tonight, the police file on sex allegations against Cliff Richard is handed to prosecutors.
A rogue marker is blamed for another leak of a SATS exam paper.
And passing through a station near you, the Flying Scotsman, but they won't say where and they won't say when.
This is the ITV Evening News with Mark Austin and Mary Nightingale.
Good evening. When you invite presidents and prime ministers to a summit, it perhaps pays not to upset them before they arrive. But David Cameron has risked doing just that by saying on camera that the leaders of two fantastically corrupt countries are coming to London. It was another unguarded comment made in front of the Queen, this time at an event marking her 90th birthday.
Yes, the countries involved are Nigeria and Afghanistan, and it comes ahead of a major conference Mr Cameron called in the wake of the Panama Papers leak. Our political correspondent Libby Vina reports.
It was the kind of occasion where pleasantries, not politics, might have been the order of the day. But chatting to the Queen, the Prime Minister suddenly let rip with some pretty unpleasant comments about those he'd invited to an anti-corruption summit in London.
We've had a very successful cabinet meeting this morning. We talk about our anti-corruption summit. We've got the Nigerians. We've got some leaders of some fantastically corrupt countries coming to Britain. Nigeria and Afghanistan, possibly the two most corrupt countries.
But this particular president is actually not corrupt. No, he's trying very hard.
They are coming at their own expense.
I mean, yes.
Not the best way, you'd think, to get people to take the summit seriously. But within the hour, Number 10 had an explanation. Both President Buhari of Nigeria, seen here on a previous visit, and President Ghani of Afghanistan had admitted their countries were very corrupt. So that's okay then. Not according to one man who was also at the palace today.
It's immensely crass and a shocking intervention by the Prime Minister, who knew he was on camera when he said these words. We, at great expense, and rightly so, have put together this anti-corruption summit, and yet two of the countries who've come, and it's great that they've come, have been dismissed and criticised publicly by our Prime Minister before it's even started. Nigerian author Ben Okri was also unimpressed.
I'm rather appalled, actually. And rather surprised that a leader of an important world nation should be making that kind of remark to the world. I think it sends a very wrong signal out to the world. I think it's a very discouraging remark. At a time like this in world politics, I don't think we need that kind of negative and distressing comments being made about nations. Nigeria has always been a great friend of Britain, and I think it just doesn't bode well for international relations.
It doesn't bode well either for this anti-corruption summit. It may be one thing for leaders to criticise their own countries, quite another for the Prime Minister to berate them for being fantastically corrupt. This isn't, of course, the first time that the Prime Minister has got into trouble over a conversation with the Queen. Last time it was over his indiscretion at reporting how she reacted to the result of the Scottish independence referendum. Today it was his own words that were causing controversy. Number 10 insisted that he'd only said pretty much what the leaders of Nigeria and Afghanistan had admitted themselves, but I think many people will be very surprised by the tone of his language.
All right, Libby, thank you very much.
Prosecutors now have to decide whether or not to charge Sir Cliff Richard over allegations of historical sex abuse. They've been passed a file of evidence from police over an alleged offence in the 1980s.
The 75-year-old singer was interviewed by detectives after his home was raided in 2014. Richard Pallow has more.
It was August, nearly 2 years ago, when police officers entered Sir Cliff Richard's home in Berkshire. The raid was broadcast live on television, but it is not until now that South Yorkshire Police, the force investigating, has gathered enough evidence, so it believes, to move the case forward. Sir Cliff, seen here last year at Cilla Black's funeral, has spoken twice to police in connection with the claims. They centre around an alleged crime of a sexual nature involving a young boy in the 1980s. The Crown Prosecution Service today received a full file of evidence and in a statement said, "We will now carefully consider its contents to establish whether there is sufficient evidence to provide a realistic prospect of conviction and whether it is in the public interest to do so."
We're at the beginning of what would be a trial process if the CPS was to decide that there was sufficient evidence to charge. But I would say we're a long way from that. Yes, I think we're probably about 6 months away from it.
The singer has never been arrested or charged in connection with the allegations. It has been confirmed the ones being looked at are historical, when he would have been at the height of his career. It is not clear as yet whether it involves one or more complainants. Sir Cliff has always strenuously denied the allegations. His spokesman today said it would be inappropriate to comment while the matter is under review. Richard Pallow, ITV News.
The government claims there was a deliberate attempt to sabotage a SATS spelling exam just hours before it was taken by 500,000 10 and 11-year-olds across England today. It's thought an exam marker downloaded a copy and tried to pass it on to a newspaper.
Well, the exam still went ahead, but it is just the latest in a series of problems and concerns over the tests, as our social affairs editor Penny Marshall reports.
Whilst children across England sat their exams today, politicians said there was now an active campaign to undermine the SAT system. And as their teachers followed strict protocol to keep their exam papers secure, others had some explaining to do. In the House of Commons, a saboteur marker was blamed for attempting to leak the tests.
Clearly, in this system, it is essential that people in positions of trust can be relied upon to act appropriately. Unfortunately, in this case, it appears that one person did not, and they leaked the Key Stage 2 English grammar, punctuation and spelling test to a journalist.
This is only the latest setback for the Key Stage 1 and 2 tests in English schools. Last week, parents organised protests amidst claims that the tests were putting too much pressure on children. And there are now accusations that the exam system has been compromised.
The utter chaos and confusion, the throwing up in the air of everything that worked and not replacing it with anything that does work is why we are not seeing robust testing in schools this year.
At this school, the head teacher said SAT tests had their place, but that children needed a rounded education.
I'm interested in developing children as good young people are going on to be great adults. So if they've got a talent in art or sport or cooking, let's promote and develop that and celebrate that.
And at the school gate, parents were dismayed by today's attempted leak.
It makes me wonder who on earth we've employed to do the job.
It doesn't give you a lot of security as a parent to think that they've got it under control.
Oblivious to all but the relief of exams behind them, these pupils have almost finished this year's tests. The government says SATs drive up standards and that the integrity of the exams was not in any way compromised. Penny Marshall, ITV News, West London.
2 Afghan nationals have been arrested in Italy, accused of planning terrorist attacks in the UK. Italian prosecutors say Hakim Naziri and another man had photos of potential British targets, including Canary Wharf, on their mobile phones. There is no evidence that an attack was imminent.
Uncontrolled immigration drives down wages and makes it harder for poorer families, the Vote Leave campaign claimed today. Former Cabinet Minister Ian Duncan-Smith said staying in the EU benefits the haves rather than the have-nots. But as our Deputy Political Editor Chris Shipp reports, he admitted immigration would still be high even if Britain did vote to leave.
Claims about life outside or inside the EU have been coming thick and fast. Yesterday it was war if we left. Today, poverty if we stay. Why? Because, said Leave campaigners, mass migration drives down wages, pushes up house prices and makes it harder to get a job. It was a claim made by the man who was, until he walked out of government in March, the Work and Pension Secretary. The poor, Ian Duncan-Smith said in a speech, would get poorer because of mass migration from the EU.
The downward pressure on wages is a trend and will only get worse if we continue to have absolutely open borders with the EU. This significantly affects British workers, especially those on low wages.
In Mr Duncan-Smith's biggest intervention since he resigned from the cabinet, he claimed if the rate of job seekers didn't change, it would add 690,000 people to the UK population. It would mean an extra 240 houses per day over the next 20 years. And he cited a Bank of England study which found a 10% rise in immigration causes a 2% fall in wages for the lowest paid. Across town, Labour marked the start of its campaign to stay in the European Union. Not before time, many have said of Jeremy Corbyn. But as it did rain on their parade, the head of the Labour campaign pointed out how the EU pours protections over British workers.
If we left the European Union, the exploitation would be worse. We'd have no protection of the Agency Workers Directive, no protection of part-timers getting the same pay as full-timers, no protection for temporary workers, no protection on maternity leave, paternity leave.
The Leave campaign, however, thinks immigration will bring them votes. But of course, being outside the EU won't stop migration. What level should immigration be if we left the EU? You say it's too high at the moment. What level should it be?
Well, I think actually the first thing is you take control of your borders, right, so that now for those outside the EU and those inside the EU have the same policy.
To reduce it to what level then?
Well, I don't have a target level, but the government's level was reduced to tens of thousands. So I was content with that. But my point is...
So you would be content if net migration into this country was 99,000?
Yeah, my point was the government position was stated. We haven't achieved it.
Right.
I think we ought to achieve it.
And that is still double the target UKIP has set. Chris Ship, ITV News.
Still to come on the ITV Evening News, a new lead in the hunt for Ben Needham, 25 years on.
Overcoming the odds, incredible stories from the Invictus Games in Florida.
And why the Flying Scotsman's nationwide tour is being kept a secret. Those stories and more after the break. Join us then. Hello again, welcome back. British police searching for the missing Ben Needham on the Greek island of Kos have appealed for a mystery caller to get back in touch. Detectives say the anonymous man contacted UK missing persons in 1993, claiming Ben was still alive and was then called Andreas. It happened 2 years after the 20-month-old disappeared. Our correspondent Geraint Vincent has more.
Detectives from South Yorkshire returned to the scene of Ben Needham's disappearance today. Their investigation has new funding and apparently new purpose, but they're following up old leads. They want to speak to a local man who contacted police anonymously 2 years after the toddler vanished and said that Ben had had his name changed to Andreas and was living with a man called Nikos.
We've tried to identify the person that made that call and we have not been able to do so. So today we're here appealing to people of Kos and to appeal to that individual who made that call in 1993 to come forward.
Given the years that have passed since Ben vanished, these detectives have another message for young men living on the island now who are unsure of their background.
I'd like any of those individuals who believe that they might be Ben themselves to come forward and speak to us. There will be no pressure on them at all. We have Ben's DNA and it's very easy for us to do a very quick test.
Ben came to Kos with his mum and his grandparents. They have endured 25 years of mistaken theories and false leads in their search for him. But with new reward money put up here for any information, Ben's family have found new hope.
New things are happening, new information's coming in. It really is opening new doors and new avenues for ourselves, and you know we're really pleased with the results so far.
Ben's mother has always believed her son was abducted from the old farm building where his grandparents were working and that he is still alive. British police will spend 2 weeks here chasing up information that was given to the original Greek police inquiry, searching for an answer to this lasting mystery. Geraint Vincent, ITV News.
Here, police chiefs have apologised after an actor posing as a suicide bomber shouted Allahu Akbar during a training exercise. The phrase, Arabic for God is great, was shouted as part of a mock terror attack at the Trafford Centre in Manchester. Greater Manchester Police said they accepted that it was ill-judged, unnecessary and unacceptable.
And ITV News understands there have been several bids for BHS, including some for the business in its entirety. The administrator set a deadline of 5 o'clock this afternoon for offers.
Now, wounded veterans at the Invictus Games have been describing their struggle with mental trauma, what's often described as invisible injuries.
Prince Harry said he wants the event to inspire more sufferers to talk about their problems. Our correspondent, Robert Moore, is at the Games in Orlando and has been hearing from some of those affected.
Representing United Kingdom.
Prince Harry says he has a vision for these Games to highlight what he calls the invisible injuries, the mental health challenges we rarely see in our veterans, but that can destroy from within. Josh Bodji has lost 3 limbs, but at these Invictus Games he stands tall in spirit. A royal engineer who nearly died in Afghanistan, but who has fought back to win medals here and to regard himself as fortunate.
I mean, it's remarkable you regard yourself as lucky.
I'm able to get up in the morning, go and ride my bike and lead a normal family life, as normal as it can be. I mean, there are always challenges in life, but it's about adapting and overcoming them challenges and finding ways to do things.
He says former soldiers will need support for decades to come.
People just need help and people just need to get behind them. There's a great saying, the war in Afghanistan's over, but the battle for guys like myself and guys with mental injuries has just begun, because we need to live the rest of our lives with legs missing, with mental injuries. So yeah, if the British public can still keep behind the armed forces, it'd be superb.
Paul Weiss is here with his family. Despite crippling physical injuries from a Taliban bomb, the former Royal Marine Commando says mental scars are far slower to heal.
The invisible injuries, I think they're worse, to be honest, because you can get prosthetics to fit your limbs, you know, but you can't fix inside your head. It's a minefield in there.
And he wants civilians to learn from the wounded soldiers who have returned from Iraq and Afghanistan that there is no shame in confronting mental health issues.
Don't be afraid to ask for help. It's the biggest thing. I wish people just held their hands up. Yes, I've got issues. And it's not nothing to be afraid of. Doesn't mean you're weak. Doesn't mean you're weak-minded or anything, you know. It just happens sometimes.
Josh and his fellow athletes are sending a message from here. Be proud, but not too proud to ask for help. Robert Moore, ITV News, Orlando.
And finally tonight, when the Flying Scotsman roared back into service in February, it was an instant hit. In fact, it proved a little too popular, with fans trespassing on tracks, often causing long delays to other trains.
So, ahead of the locomotive's tour of England and Scotland, organisers will stop publicising its schedule. But as Damon Green found out, that won't deter thousands of train spotters.
Shortly arriving at platform 2, ladies and gentlemen, please have your cameras ready for the worst kept secret in the northeast of England. Yes, the Flying Scotsman calling at all stations between York and Newcastle this afternoon, but the timetable kept under wraps in an attempt to keep people away. No chance. The regulars who've been spotting trains here since 1962 wouldn't have missed this for the world.
Well, it's something from the past. What we saw when we were children. You know, before you were born, and to come down and all these trains.
When Flying Scotsman returned to service a few months ago after a 10-year refurbishment, the excitement among steam enthusiasts so great, the crowd so large, some spilled onto the tracks, causing delays to dozens of train services. So now when the engine is running to Tyneside today, to Edinburgh on Saturday, the itinerary won't be officially published, for all the good that might do. The fact is, everywhere the Flying Scotsman goes, there will be people here to see it, and keeping the movements of this locomotive a secret is going to be impossible.
Steam enthusiasts talk to each other, you see, and anyone with a ticket has a pretty good idea of the departure times and, of course, the social media.
I found out about it, and I'm not a train enthusiast, it's my dad, so I sent it all to him, so it must have been social media, I think, that I found out. So it's there.
So if you want to know where Flying Scotsman will be this Saturday, don't look for a timetable, make Facebook friends with a train spotter. Damon Green, ITV News in County Durham.
Unreliable timetable. What's new? That's it for now. Tom Bradby will be here at 10.
From all the team here, have a great evening. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.